Casting a PT Flex severed leg. Today we're going to show how to make a severed leg using a PT Flex skin and a flexible foam core. To begin, we're going to create our PT Flex 20 skin. Now PT Flex 20 has a B that needs to be shaken before you use it, so obviously shake the part B. And we're going to dispense just the part B first, and we're going to pigment that before we add the part A. Now keep in mind that PT Flex 20 and the other PT Flex materials have about a 5-minute working time and about a 1-hour demold time. So you want to be sure that you move fast as soon as you add the part A, which is why we're going to pigment just the part B first. Now for the skin on our leg, we're going to need about 500 grams of PT Flex 20, which means we'll divide that in half, which gives us 250 grams of B and 250 grams of A. Now once we've measured out our part B, we're ready to use PolyColor pigments to achieve a flesh tone. And to do that, we're going to add a drop of red PolyColor, 2 drops of yellow, and 1 drop of brown. And you'll find that's a good starting point. You can manipulate that using other colors if necessary, but that's a great starting point for just a generic, slightly tan flesh tone. Now the PT Flex 20 starts out a slight beige color. If you were to do this with the PT Flex 50, 60, 70, or 85, those all naturally come out kind of an amber color. So if you're doing a flesh tone with those PT Flex materials, you would need to add white as a background color before you start mixing your flesh tone. Now once we've got our flesh tone where we want it with our part B, we're ready to add the part A. Now part A will change the color very slightly. So it tends to lighten it just a little bit, but it doesn't change it enough that you have to worry too much about the addition of the part A. So make sure you get your flesh tone roughly where you want it. You can do a little bit of tweaking after you add that part A, but keep in mind that as soon as you add the part A, the clock starts ticking and you have about 5 minutes working time at 70 degrees before that gels. So you want to move fast. Now the other thing here is, since we're not just casting this in a solid mass, we want to brush this into our silicone mold to create a realistic skin. And in order to do that, we're going to need to thicken this to a paste consistency. We want this to be a slight paste that's going to stay up on a vertical surface. So in order to do that, we're going to add some of the PolyFiber Thickener. Now PolyFiber Thickener, you've probably seen us use this in as a resin thickener, and even with gel tin as a thickener for life cast. This is a great just generic thickener for oil-based products. Anytime you need to thicken a resin or a polyurethane rubber, this is a great way to achieve anything from a light paste to a peanut butter consistency. Now once we've stirred that in, we're ready to start brushing that into our silicone mold. Now keep in mind, the clock is ticking here, so we want to get that mixed up accurately and move on to the next step without too much hesitation. We don't want that to gel right in the middle of the casting. Now for the mold, we'll be using our full body mold we cast in Platsil Gel Tin. This is a full body mold that we featured in a couple of videos also on YouTube. So check out that video process if you want to see how we made this mold. Now, what we're doing here, this is actually kind of a 3/4 cast, and the back is open, and we're using that as a means to brush the skin into place. Now this particular gel tin mold was designed to lay flat on a table, so actually the back of the calf and the thigh there won't be complete, and that open area will actually wind up basically being a large seam on the final cast. But in this case that's okay. We needed a fast severed leg for a haunted house. This was for Zombie Manor, and that's Dean Jarnig helping brush PT Flex into place. Now as soon as the PT Flex starts to gel, and you can usually tell that by the brush starting to drag a little bit, you want to stop there and leave it alone, and you're ready to move on to your casting of your flexible foam. Now we're going to cast the inside of the leg with Prop Foam 4, which is mixed 100B to 45A by weight. And that's crucial. We've got several different flexible foams, and this one's a little bit tricky on the ratio, but it creates a very nice high quality flexible foam. Now once we've measured out our parts, The color is not near as critical here. We're actually going to create kind of a meaty red color to go inside our leg. So once the end is exposed, it'll give us a nice severed limb type look. So we're going to add a little bit of brown and a little bit of the red PolyColor. And I added just a little bit extra brown just in case. And that'd give us kind of a nice dark, deep red color. Now you want to move fast with your foam. And one of the things we're going to do is embed a piece of plywood in there. I've got a little 3/4 inch strip of plywood that we're going to embed inside the leg to simulate the bone. If you don't do that on a long part like this, it just looks fake. If you've got a part bending where your audience knows there should be a bone, it just doesn't look right. So it's always a good idea to embed some kind of armature in a large part like this, especially when it's made of flexible foam. Now we could also use rigid foam to avoid that, but if we use rigid foam, then the part isn't going to have any give, and that also takes away some of the realism. Now we can brush that foam in the initial stages of the foam expanding. You can manipulate it a little bit with a brush, but it is tricky. You've got to move fast and deliberately, and you have to be careful not to collapse the foam by overworking it. So after about 45 seconds to a minute, you're ready to leave it alone and allow it to cure completely. Now we're ready to demold our foot. Now the nice thing is the heat from the foam curing actually accelerates the cure of the PT Flex. So we were actually able to remove or demold our part from the silicone mold in about 40 minutes. Now it's critical that the PT Flex skin be cured completely. So if you're working in a cool environment, make sure you've given that adequate time to cure, because you'll notice we're putting a pretty good stress on those toes, and we don't want to accidentally pop one off demolding this too early. And there is our PT Flex skin with a polyfoam core. And you notice that our foot is able to wiggle a little bit, like the ankle has some movement, but yet the wood inside gives it that nice bone look. Now, since this is a haunted house prop and time is of the essence, we needed to do a really fast paint job. So what we did here is I mixed up some additional PT Flex 20 and used it as a paint base. And what I'm doing here is measuring out about 30 grams of PT Flex 20. And again, that mixes 1:1 by weight or volume. Weight is ideal for this sort of thing because when you're working in very small amounts, it's easy to get off ratio if you're eyeballing. So make sure, when in doubt, always use a scale. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm measuring out my PT Flex and mixing that and adding a little bit of red, and then we're going to need a little bit of brown. And this is a little trick you can do when you need less than a drop. What you can do is actually dip your popsicle stick in just a little bit of that brown to darken up that red. And you see, if we were to add too much brown, it would just take it way over too dark and actually wind up with more just a brownish red. Now what I'm doing here is just a very fast rub out paint job of brushing that red into some of those detailed areas, and then I'm going to carefully wipe that back off and leave that red PT Flex in those really detailed areas. And that just gives it a little bit more life and a little bit more contrasting color on the surface. Doing this with some reds and some bruise tones on a severed limb like this really adds a lot of life to the finished part. And just breaking up that even flesh tone just adds a lot to that realism, as you see from the bottom of the foot there. And we're also going to hit the knee and use the same approach, just a little bit of the red wiped in and then wipe back off, and that leaves red in the little wrinkles and creases and just gives us a very natural look there. Now again, for time's sake, we want to move on quick, so we're just going to mix up one final color, and this is some more PT Flex 20. This is about 20 grams that I mixed up to a purple color, kind of a bruise tone. And again, we're just going to stipple that around the stump area and give it a nice mottled appearance. And again, you can go all out with this and do more colors, but for now, those two colors of a dark red and a bruise color gave us a very nice, realistic, finished severed leg. And there is our final product, our PT Flex and flexible foam severed leg cast into a gel tin life cast mold. And keep in mind that the PT Flex and other special effects materials are available at our web store at brickintheyard.com.